Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Joel, as I think you know, whenever we're doing the show together, I'm always going onto your Facebook timeline to find something, because you were just telling me, I think you post like 3, 4, 5 things a day. So there's always some content there that's worthy of turning into a show. And today was no exception. You had a bunch of good stuff on there, but you had a quote by Lewis Howes that really kind of grabbed my attention. I figured we can make that our topic today. It said, "You are who you surround yourself with. Relationships are everything. Spend time making connections with supportive and like-minded people. Hang out with those who inspire you, challenge you to grow, and bring out the best in you. It'll be worth it." And I like that. First of all, I think it's true.
Yeah, I think it's very true. And I know, for me, my relationships with people that are like-minded, that we can discuss things, it's so valuable to me. I love real conversation. I love running ideas. And for me to have a relationship with someone that I can speak to at a deep, authentic level is one of the most valuable things to have. And I don't have that many in my orbit. Because I don't find many people like to talk about the stuff I like to talk about, and nothing wrong with that. It's just different views and stuff. But when I find somebody that is headed in the right direction, that wants to be, whatever the growth mechanism, we can discuss the depths of stuff. I just love that. I don't like to go to parties with superficial chat and stuff like that. But if I could sit down with somebody that I'm really connected to, I can spend hours just talking. I have a friend that's a neighbor. We'll talk about some incredible stuff, and really enjoy speaking with her. And I just, obviously I have other people I can do that with. But to me, those relationships are the most valuable thing I have. Just that the ability to run stuff by and like, I love to discuss religion, but a lot of people can't discuss religion. Because it gets them very upset. Or I don't mind discussing politics if we can discuss politics and not get arguments, So the idea of being able to make those connections, I also think that the right relationships you exchange energy with people. And I'm very much an energy person. So when I pick up on an energy, and I really, doing what I do for a living, I'm attracted to people's brains. I'm attracted to how their brains look and work and all that. I just like how they process stuff. So that's a fascinating thing to me. So I think relationships are fundamental for my growth. I'm always looking for those like-minded people. You and I have always we don't agree with everything, a few real obvious topics like baseball and ridiculous stuff you do. But, for the most part, we agree, and it can have some really good discussions. And even if we disagree with each other, it's still a really good discussion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, we don't want to get into fights or anything like that. So we don't get disagreeable. We might disagree on something, then we'll laugh about it 3 seconds later. I mean, it's not a big deal. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So to me, relationships are fundamental. I think when people initially hear the word relationship, when I saw the topic, I didn't know exactly where we're going with this today. So,
I didn't either.
Yeah, which is normally what we do, which by the way makes it a great show. Yeah. So, traditional romantic relationships, I'm a train wreck in. I've had that's just not my strong suit. I've always ended up with the wrong person. That's just wrong. So that to me has been sort of elusive, where finding people that I'm really just really close to and connect to. And I'm always scared to get into romantic relationship, because I'm fearful I would lose that really good connection, if that makes any sense,
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I'm also reminded of something that my other good friend, Cindy Chavez, former co-host on the show, once said, and she actually said it a few times, but it really stuck with me, which is that we don't just have relationships with people. We have relationships with everything in our lives.
Sure.
We kind of skip that part, but we have relationships with our computers, with our handheld devices. We have relationships with bridges and automobiles, and we have relationships with vacations, and we have relationships with outer space. We have you can see it; it's behind me. We have relationships everywhere.
Yeah.
And all those relationships are energetic. All of them are vibrational. that thought alone, I think probably had more impact on me in the 11 years I've done this show than anything, because it helped me to make the shift away from the old mindset that I had, which is that most of the universe is just static and dead. Because I now believe everything's, I mean, it's a dramatic shift. That idea. And once I adopted that idea, I mean, there are still times when I'm kind of acting like, stuff is dead. Stuff is just, it's just stuff. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any energy. I do that as frequently as anybody else, I think. But then there are times when I sit and I realize, my God, that chair I'm looking at over here actually is energetic. And it kind of blows my mind.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And relationships to me is I look at it as similar to what you're talking about. Energy connection. When I connect with somebody on an energetic level, when we have matching energies, that is rare and incredible. But I also look, my relationship toward food, my relationship toward everything. There is sort of a vibrational attraction to everything we're doing. And so it's almost like the scene in the Matrix when Neo sees everything in code. Everything's relationship. In relationship, no matter what it is an energy attraction, energy exchange. And, when you talk to somebody, you really get that person. You want to be around that person more because of that energy that you're exchanging with them. And the reason that I love the stuff that I love, I'm in the gym every day. I have a great relationship with physical health, and my body and my mind. It all goes together. So when you adjust those relationships, and your relationship to your environment has a lot to do. The energy in a room can be changed by somebody walking in or leaving. I always like my mindset when I enter a room for the first time, I want to be the person that influences the energy in the room. I want to bring that energy to the room. That's my goal when I walk into a room. I want to bring that energy. And and it's a good goal. And I bring that positive energy in, so I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I think I do that a lot of times. I'll come into a room and bring that energy.
I'd be shocked actually if you didn't, to be perfectly honest. I've known you all these years. I mean, it would kind of blow my mind. And speaking of relationships, I mean, I haven't really been giving a lot of attention lately to people in the live stream, but we got listeners in the live stream and we have relationships going on there. By the way, hello, Jeffrey. First time I've seen Jeffrey in a while. He's a long time listener, but I haven't seen him in the live stream in a while. And listener named Mary Lynn, interesting. She says, this popped in my feed and I'm about to host a spot on attachment styles, which is obviously right in the same wheelhouse as relationships being everything. But attachment, it plays a big role in relationships of all kinds, healthy and unhealthy. And
absolutely,
this includes the things that we're trying to attract into our lives because we have attachment issues there, right? That's where a lot of blocks come from. We can also have attachment gains, attachment values, if you will. In other words, certain things that come into our lives or people who come into our lives, experiences, relationships that come into our lives produce positive attachments too. I mean, so it can work either way, but in a sense, that's what relationships are. They're about attachment, aren't they?
Absolutely. And, my work that I do with foster care kids, and my boys who I've adopted, it's a very common thing to kids that have been taken from their families early to have attachment issues, trouble attaching. There's a term called reactive attachment disorder where you have a really hard time attracting and attaching with people, bonding with parentals, sort of that parental figure. It's really, that's usually addressed, it usually manifests as the child not bonding with. It's like because they didn't bond with their biological parents or they were neglected early, they failed to bond, and they're desperate for relationships, but they never bond. And so they're always on to that next relationship. So the attachment and the various attachment styles and attachment disorders, they're all interconnected with relationships.
And those attachments, like we were mentioning there, they can go either way. They can be of a positive nature or a negative nature. The thing that I always try to remember about that is what makes them positive or makes them negative is how we feel about them. How are we relating? How are we relating to the attachment? In what way is and which is one is in charge? Is the attachment in charge of us, or are we in charge of the attachment? Because so often it seems like, especially when we're in those negative situations, we feel like the attachment's in charge of us.
Well, when you originally, for the most part, now this is not necessarily psychology 101 here, but when you hear the word attachment, there is almost always describing a situation that's perceived as negative. It's attachment. You're generally attached to a concept, or you're attached to something, but attachments they're good. They're not bad, but the attachment style of a person can tell us a lot. I can look at an attachment style and try to often see, you probably went through this as a kid. After a while, you see the similarities because your childhood is where you develop your attachment styles usually. Mm-hmm. And then of course that can be adjusted as you go, but the attachment style of has a lot to do with your original environment, what you're looking for. And it's a fascinating combination. Equal to relationships and attachment is which I find this is the most fascinating piece of all this. Why are we attracted to certain people? I don't mean necessarily sexually. That's pretty obvious sometimes, but I'm talking about why are we attracted to certain personalities? And, that's the thing that baffles me is, I will just start talking to you and I just immediately am drawn to an energy, and I'm just fascinated by, I can't ever quantify it entirely. And other people that are truly trying to attach and talk to me and stuff like that doesn't mean I can't chat with them, but I don't feel that connection the way I do with Sam.
Well, I think it's fair to say that when we are experiencing any kind of an attachment, what we're really saying is, I resonate to that.
Yes.
I feel that. I feel
yes.
that on almost a submolecular level, a pure energetic level.
Yes.
And at that level, it usually feels either good or bad. That's the way it is with most things, but we either associate as something that feels good or something that feels uncomfortable or bad or something in that range. The stuff that feels uncomfortable or bad, that's where we have the negative experiences, the negative kinds of attachments, the kind you were talking about that come out of childhood and so forth. That's where Mary Lynn makes reference in her comment to anxiety attachment, anxious attachment. Mm-hmm. That's an example of that kind of a thing. But we also have positive attachments. I mean, God forbid you have a thing of, you're attached to football. I have no idea why, but you are. Yeah. And that attachment is a good one because it's fun. It's something you enjoy, you look forward to. So that's why I say it really comes down to how do you feel about the attachment?
Well, one thing I probably say every single show, and here we are again, a few minutes into the show, is perspective it's all perspective based. Because attachments can go from good to bad as well. I mean, attachments can be valuable and then not. Early in addictive behavior, there's an addictive attachment style. These are my terms where something is sort of, starts off, I really enjoy doing this. I'm going to do this a lot. And then you get very attached to the concept, and then eventually it's not serving you anymore. And then it's really hard to let go of the attachment of that. Equal to in addiction, I've always broken it down to, you have the physical addiction to the substance or behavior. Then that's the physical addiction. You have then the mental addiction, where your brain has been tuned into it, and that's a little different from the physical. But I also you have the attachment part. It's like when somebody wants to quit smoking, the nicotine is generally out of their system in 3 or 4 days. But you'll often say they're attached to the ritual of smoking has an attachment that really isn't part of the nicotine dependence, but it's just you're attached to that movement. When you're talking to people outside, most people who quit smoking will say, "What do I do with my hands?" Because they're used to having something in their hands all the time.
Well, what we're talking about there really is habit, isn't it? I mean,
habits
are habitual behaviors.
Yeah, but I often consider the attachment to the habit. The habit itself we're sort of attached to that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when something is habitual, it's familiar.
It is.
We know it because we do it all the time. right?
Yes, but yeah, and that's I'm saying pretty much the same thing. But like when I say when I talk to a client, okay, so what part of this aren't you giving up? And we really get to the habit piece,
Mm-hmm.
but my identity is attached to that as a smoker is what a lot of people will tell me. I'm attached to the image of a smoker. I like what people who smoke talk about. I've heard them, they're attached to the lifestyle sometimes beyond the habit of it.
So at that point, we're talking about habit being part of identity. That was the word.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
this is part of who I am.
Yes. Yes. Most young alcoholics who I work with that it becomes obvious they have to survive. They're going to have to stop drinking, and they do a pretty good job of putting the alcohol down. They get through the cravings. They do the stuff they need to do, but they're embarrassed to tell people they're not drinking. They don't want to go to the party and order a water. They don't want to go to the party and not have a drink in their hand. And it isn't the alcohol they're missing. They're missing the image of. They're missing the fun that goes, at least the perception of fun that goes on at a party where you're drinking. So that's what most of them tell me is the biggest problem. It's like, yes, I completely know I'm addicted. I need to stop alcohol. I'm over the cravings. I'm past all that stuff, but I want to go out with my friends and I don't want to be the one that doesn't order a beer.
All right. So let's take that as the talking point that we're going to dive into, because we always find something to go down a rabbit hole on. So let's go down this rabbit hole. All right. So I want to be able to feel good about my own identity without being tied down to this attachment, this habitual attachment that I'm trying to get rid of. Okay. How do I do it?
Are you asking me that question, right?
I just figured I'd throw it out there.
Okay. Well, there's probably no more complicated question than that. So, thank you.
I like to give you the open-ended ones. That gives you lots of range.
Well, a lot of that stuff is, again, it's, we talked 6-7 months ago about the book called the Mind Map book. I don't remember the exact name of the book, but it was talking about the mind map. So when I define me as I am Joel, I'm a life coach, I'm a father, I'm a weightlifter, I love Chipotle, I got my list of things that I really like to do. I go to my favorite burger place at least once a week. So I have the image of me. So I have adapted to that energy, and I'm attached to all of those things. So when something violates or tries to take that away from me, I'm discomforted. I've creates discomfort in me because I'm used to that. That's the definition of me. So I start working with people on actually changing the mind map and start, stepping back from that being part of your identity, because it's all subconscious at that point. And getting, as we know, we don't have direct access to the subconscious immediately. You do that through repetitive work. You do that over and over, and eventually you can get stuff off your mind map, but it doesn't go easily. So it's a process of reprogramming, a process of not feeding that as much, and eventually it sort of fades away.
If I remember correctly, too, from that particular episode, one of the things that we identified is that if you want to change a habit, if you want to change a behavior, you got to give it a good 60 to 90 days of repeating it in order to really ingrain it permanently.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm fascinated by one of the recent arguments that I'm seeing on the internet. I'm literally hearing people argue between 63 and 66 days as a number. And I find that fascinating. It is between 60 and 100 days. It is somewhere there. I don't know who is coming up with very specific 63 days. It's driving me crazy. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
64 and a half? I mean, come on.
But they're talking like it is. I see people fighting over, oh no, Harvard says it's 63. No, this one says 66. It's like, really?
This is what is often referred to as having too much time on the internet, but
but between 60 and 90 days, depending on the severity of whatever we're working on, it does take to to reprogram, change the habit, change the addiction, change the craving, whatever that is. The neuroplasticity of the brain, it adapts and adjusts, it fixes that, but it is a slow process.
And because it's a slow process, it's one that's easy to trip up on.
Absolutely. Yes. Because that's what happens along the way, because, subconsciously, what we do subconsciously is you're on cruise control most of the time. I always use the example to explain this. I drove to work today, and I did the same routine today that I do every single day. I went to the gym. I went and got some lunch. I changed, came home, showered, changed, drove to the office, had my sessions, and then I drove home. Nothing took place out of the ordinary today for me. So I don't remember my drive into work. I drive the same way every day into work. I get there. It takes me about 17 minutes almost every single day, depending on one light. Might be 18 minutes, but
it's that deeply ingrained because you have it timed in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So I drive that way. Now, on any given day, if there's an accident or a detour, I have to go conscious brain driving, and I will remember that driving to work. But I don't remember today's driving to work, and I do it every single day. I mean, usually I work 7 days a week, at least at the office, 6-7 days a week. So I will drive to my office every day and not even realize that I went the same way. Now, it's not unsafe. That the subconscious brain actually is more, I'm less likely to get into a wreck when I'm in that state. It's doing what it does by habit. But all it takes is for a second, the conscious brain has the ability to cut right in immediately and adjust to any situation. So there's no danger in this, but knowing how that works, that applies to our habits, our attachments, our relation, all this stuff is there. That if we're going to change it, it's protected. You shouldn't be able to change it easily. It's there for a reason. The subconscious brain is really slow to change as a protective mechanism. The conscious brain, okay, well, that makes sense. You can instantly change your opinion, mindset with your conscious brain, but your subconscious brain might not buy it. It's like, no, we're not buying that.
But it's not surprising because our conscious brain is not really good at maintaining attention. We have short attention disorder of all kinds.
Well, especially my brain of all brains. Woo!
But it's true. I mean, anybody who's ever tried to sit down for 10 minutes to do X, I don't care what the X is, it's really hard to just stay focused on it without having anything else distract you away from it or whatever. I mean, there are certain activities that are habitual, and there's where the habit comes in again, that we find that to be easy to repeat. But if it's conscious attention, my goodness, that could be just mind-blowingly difficult.
Yes, especially if it's something that's boring.
Especially then.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Oh, I had to take a CPR class for some ridiculous reason. I don't know why I had to take it. But to renew my something or another, I had to take a CPR class. So I was expecting the good old fashioned guy that was going to go, let's run through this real quick. We'll recertify you. But I got a young person who is like really militant about CPR. So I had to do the entire thing. And I've tried to keep a good attitude, but I have to. You're doing all the steps, and the young lady that was conducting it, I wasn't being disruptive, but you could tell she's like, Mr. Elston, are you paying attention? And I go, not really. Not really. I will not lie to you. I am not.
You lost me 3 hours ago.
Yeah. I said, I am here because I don't know why really, but I'm here. So I'm going to pass your test, but I am not paying much attention. I'm actually playing on my phone. I'm just letting you know.
Well, you were honest about it. That was cool.
Yeah. She didn't want to say that, but I wasn't talking. I wasn't disrupting anybody, but it was clear I wasn't paying. And I passed the test. So
of course you did.
Yeah. So that was good. But attention on something that is not my thing is. But if it's in my brain, if it's something I'm really into, I could go for hours on the attention. But
I think this is ultimately where we're pointing to what the problem is, though, because
yes, exactly.
Earlier we were talking about the person who is getting over, say, an alcohol addiction, and they find that they're faced with this is part of my identity. And that part is so habitually built in, they don't know how to shift it. And if they do try to apply their conscious mind for the reasons we're just describing, they have a hard time maintaining that for a long enough period of time to start ingraining it the other way. That's where the real challenge is.
Absolutely. And that's, like our listener was talking about, when any of these things that how our brain works, like she mentioned anxiety, the habit of anxiety, the way the brain works with anxiety is very similar to attention as well, that anxiety can creep in out of nowhere for no reason. Nothing changed, but anxiety can be there. And depending if you have an anxious, sort of that subconscious anxious, personality, that anxious, disorder, anxiety disorder, whatever you have, anxiety is one that's similar to me that just sort of it's there. It has such an effect. It can be so debilitating, but yet it is, even when I have no reason to be anxious about this at all, somehow your brain's convincing you there's still a threat and the anxiety response. Anxiety is very perplexing to me.
So that means that somehow we have to find some way to reprogram that through alternative taping. I'm trying to find the right adjective to describe it. Alternatively recording in our nervous system such that when we're dealing with stuff, the anxiety tape isn't playing and another tape is playing in its place. But that's where the challenge is. How do we maintain enough focus on the non-anxious state in order to erase the anxiety?
Well, I generally find when I'm working with people in that particular set is, first of all, keeping your mind busy, doing this other. If you're sitting around thinking and you have an anxiety disorder, that is a really bad combination. Mm-hmm. Keeping busy, keeping focused, action is the antidote to anxiety often. Taking some type of action. Instead of worrying about what am I going to do? Well, how's this going to work out? I need to take some action. And like I've said many times in this show, sometimes the action might be get up and wash your dishes. But some action is going to begin the process of quelling the anxiety. But the ironic thing, or the sad thing, is deep anxiety actually debilitates you and convinces you don't get up and do anything. Just sit here and wallow in this high vibrational or really low vibrational, that's really stressed out mindset, and worry about what's going to happen next.
Yeah, that's true. But it's a good tip, though, the idea that by distracting the mind, because that's what the point of the action is in this particular context, by distracting the mind, you at least give yourself a fighting chance.
Yes.
It's when you're doing the focus on, I feel so anxious, you're just stuck in that rut. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah. One of my young clients, I've always challenged my young clients. I tell them strategies and techniques, but I always encourage them to come up with their own version. You know what I'm saying? I want them to be able to say, here's what I did. So, there's various distracting techniques. There's breathing techniques. There's counting techniques. There's a million things out there. There's, emotional freedom technique. There's tapping. There's a lot of different effective things, especially a lot of these the effectiveness depends on how you believe they're effective or not. So this one young man, we talked about all the various things. We tried a bit. So what he did was he went and memorized some old rap song, and he told me which one. This is like a 14-year-old. So this is like a 1980s rap song.
Oh, okay. Well, all right.
One of the first ones, like Hotel, Motel, Holiday Inn, whatever that thing was. I don't remember what it was. And so I don't know how he even found that, but so it makes him laugh. So he starts rapping that old song, and it's such a ridiculous rap. I mean, it's talking about hotels and motels, and I don't know. And so it breaks he memorized it, and that's his technique. It works for him. It's just finding something that pulls him out, distracts him. And he said that. So he created his own distraction by finding a 1980s, end of the 80s rap song.
Which is cool. That's really great that you found
that. Yeah. And so I have no idea how he found it, why he found it, but it's a really effective tool. So you can develop your own version of that, but we get back to the same thing. the relationship with anxiety for many people has existed for a long time. And it has been programmed into your subconscious program as your reality. That's what, the anxious attachment style is programmed subconsciously.
To what extent is anxiety tied to worry? And the reason I ask that question is I have an opinion about worry. I'm not sure that everybody agrees with it. I think probably most people to some degree disagree with it. But my opinion about worry is that it's useless. It's an emotion that doesn't really serve any good purpose. I've had people point out good purposes to me, but I even hear what they suggest. I say, is that really all that good? But my point is that a lot of anxiety seems to have a worry type element to it. In other words, it seems to not actually serve a purpose. And
I completely agree.
What is the purpose?
Well, you got to look at the originating purpose of why we have anxiety as a tool. The originating purpose, back in the caveman days, I often use that phrase. I don't even really know what that was, but a long time ago. So, there's obvious reason to be scared. Anxiety served a purpose. I need to be super cautious. Anxiety kept you alive. I need to worry about, there's some, in my disclaimer, I know there were no dinosaurs when man were here, but in my world they are. So, so I can't leave the cave because there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex out there at the water hole. You know what I'm saying? Can't do that. Mm-hmm. But eventually got to leave the cave. So the anxiety is listening, when you're super anxious, you're on high alert. You'll hear every little sound. Your smell increases. Your digestive process stops. Your body is prepared for fight or flight. It's ready to roll. That's what that's what it's intended for, to run from the Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's what it really.
Know that it does have at least some purpose. I mean, I don't remember the last time T-Rex actually came past me, but it's something that's good,
Yeah. And if you want to dispute my historical timeline, just reach out to Walt at loatoday.net and discuss it with him. But the idea that it's
Joel@Elston.com, but we.
But the truth is, what happens now, today's world, that same gene that same instinct of anxiety, it exists just as strongly, but yet we get ramped up and we do that. So the body's once again prepared for fight or flight, it's ready to go. But now all we can do is feed it more worry. So you sit there and think about, wow, this feels terrible. And worry does feel necessary. It feels necessary. It has no value whatsoever. It just, especially when you apply the law of attraction to the concept of worry, worrying is like praying for what you don't want.
Yes.
Is literally what that is. So worry, for people who don't believe in law of attraction, worry is minimally useless. For people who do believe in law of attraction, and law of attraction doesn't really care if you believe it or not, worry invites what you don't want. That is what makes it so sad. If you're worried all the time, you're inviting more things to be worried about, and that's how you get exacerbated and stuck in the concept of, that's where anxiety and panic attacks come in. That's where it gets out of control.
Now, there is an ironic side to this. The ironic side is that if we're worried about X or we're anxious about X, and then X, the worst case scenario, comes through and happens, that actually can be a good thing. Because my reaction is to be pissed. Like, that thing actually happened. Now, that was almost worse than the anxiety. Actually, the anxiety was worse because I was doing it for months and months. But the actual action happened about 5 minutes. But after that thing happened, that terrible result that I was most dreading when it actually happened, I look back on the anxiety and it's like, wow, the anxiety just seems like it's nothing now because, I have this whole new perspective that came through because this thing happened that I didn't like, and I'm really pissed about it. The feeling of being pissed off, that's my point. The feeling of being pissed off almost shifts the vibration of it.
Hey, you're literally discussing the emotional guidance scale, as we always do. You move up the emotional guidance scale. So that's what you're talking about. So yes, moving from anxiety to piss is very healthy. But also sort of to your point, the idea that like in my old days, way back in my life, I was, in the middle of a severe gambling addiction and things were falling apart. I was embezzling money from the company I worked for and I didn't know how to stop it. The hole was getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And things were falling apart. I finally got fed up with it. I turned myself into my employer, and I ended up at this sober living home in Anna Maria Island, Florida, where I now own a home. And I was there every day, and every single day I would wake up expecting the police to be there. Am I getting arrested today? And it was terrible. And so I was there. I arrived there October 17th in 1995. And every day until October 11th, I was waiting for the police to show up, and it was terrible. It was scary. And on October 11th, I showed up to work, and the police were there. I was horrified. They were very nice. They were very gentle. They were very kind. They told me, we're here to talk about what happened at your previous job. And of course I told them everything, and they arrested me and took me to jail. So all that time, every day, worst case scenario, if I ever get arrested, I don't know if I'll survive it. Once I was arrested, I was taken to Hillsborough County Jail in Tampa on Orient Road, for my listeners that know the area. It's a nice, very nice jail. And I was booked. There was a lot of people there. It was sort of a scary environment. But once I was put into the cell, they put you there and they shut the door. It was one of the biggest reliefs of my life. It sounds weird. To be put in jail, it was locked. I was like, oh, thank God that's over.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, I had no idea what was about to happen. I could go to jail for 10 years. I don't know what's about to happen. But I do know for a fact that I would have quit worrying. So supporting your theory there, when worst case scenario does happen, you're able to, like there was not a day of that worry that helped me. But when I was finally arrested, it was not near the bad event I thought it would be. Jail was exceptionally boring, but it was not dangerous. I also, in the food, I cannot describe how ungodly bad the food was. I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. So yeah. So that was, I was eating some Jell-O that was pretty tasty, and some bread, Jell-O and bread. That was pretty much all I could eat. So it was not high quality food. 0 stars. I give it 0 stars. So yeah, it was not good, but again, safe. I survived it, but all that worry didn't do any good. So does that make sense?
Well, there was sort of an emotional release that happened.
Absolutely.
When you finally said, thank God, that was an emotional release that happened.
Yeah. There's still a lot that was going to happen, because on that first day, I didn't know if I was going to prison for 5 years. I didn't know if I was going to prison for 20 years. I had no idea. So, and I wasn't well versed in any of that stuff. So I was just expecting but I was to a point, I was so tired of living with that anxiety. Whatever's going to happen is not going to be worse than living in the anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I was in jail for 30 days. I was on probation for 3 years. I paid off all my stuff. Eventually got it. It was a turning point. Jail was a turning point. It's when I was reborn. It was when everything changed for a very positive. In the long run, jail wasn't positive, but the result of jail was very positive. So the anxiety was, the worry was just, if I would have known it had been that easy, I'd have just hopped right onto the jail quicker if I could have. Let's just get this done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it also raises an interesting point in that you mentioned earlier, you talked about the importance of taking action. You took action. You said, okay, yes. I've been given this opportunity to only do 30 days in jail and 3 years probation. I'm going to make that into something. That's not always the reaction that people have.
Exactly.
You chose that route.
Yes. And, the depth of the hole that I was in wasn't, once I was done with jail, I was a convicted felon. I owed $250,000 in various credit card debts and loans and stuff, some bad checks. I owed my family an unbelievable amount of money for money. I was at such a deficit, and I was a convicted felon, and all I could do was, I had no idea what to do, because you couldn't get a job. I couldn't get a job. So I ended up getting these odd jobs, waiting tables. I eventually got into the field of counseling with the place that I was staying at, the sober living home. Eventually got here. The chain of events that led all that to happen are something that seemed absolutely impossible. Mm. But the reason that I share that is we during the anxiety piece, I could never imagine having the life that I have now. I was like, my life's over. I will never, and I'm terrible. I'm not good at with my hands. I'm not good at like a trade or anything. I had no clue how I was going to support myself or what was going to, but yet I was able to somehow manage to do that. And, eventually everybody got paid back, paid off my fines, paid off the restitution. I paid my family, have an incredible life now. It's just such a different thing. The anxiety that took place during that time, once it gave way in jail, I became all about the action of everything. And I'm not trying to paint it like I never had anxiety after that. I did. But sure. I kept action. A bias toward action was my everyday effort.
So what's the difference between you and what you did, even though you, like you said, you were anxious at times, you still had to deal with that kind of thing. It was not a clear sailing path to victory. But what's the difference between what you did, where you at least took some steps, and the person who doesn't take steps? Why did you take steps, and why is it that the other guy doesn't? I mean, that's not easy. I mean, obviously it's a very clear delineation the way I'm describing it, but it's not all that clear in the way it plays out in reality. It's often pretty subtle.
It really is. I don't know the difference, to be honest with you. I don't know what was in me. I grew up in craziness. I grew up with addiction all around me, mental illness around me. And there's something inside of me that said, I'm going to stop this. It's almost like it became a challenge. I watched generations of my family just screw it up. My biological father killed himself. My biological grandfather killed himself. Just crazy stuff I saw as a kid. And I'm not going to do this. So it's almost like I just said, I'm going to be the anomalous person here. I'm going to be the one that goes and does. And I had in the beginning of my recovery, I was going to Gamblers Anonymous, which is the 12-step version similar to Alcoholics Anonymous, which I'm not a big fan of, by the way. But anyway, that's a whole different topic. And so this may sound narcissistic or antisocial, but I heard very early, one of my very first meetings, like 9 people all arrived to our first meeting the same week. And somebody said, 9 of you arrived. Statistically, 8 of you will fail over the next year. And so I said, well, I'm sorry, guys. It's not going to be me. So, not that I was ever happy that somebody relapsed, but when somebody would relapse, I go, well, there's one. And I was the only one. He statistically was right. I was the only one out of that bunch that made it that time. Others came back and got recovery, but out of that batch, I was the only one that made it. That's been 29 years.
Wow. Yeah. And quite a journey since then.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting point, and it's an important one too. I mean, Marilyn, when she brought this up earlier about anxiety attachment issues, that's kind of it's directly related to what we're talking about, because it's not easy to shift. It's not easy to make that change, and it's not easy to take that action, because that's what the difference was for you. You took an action and you kept following through, even if you stumbled, even if you screwed up 5 steps backward for every step forward. You kept persisting. Persistence. That's probably the theme that plays out. You persisted. How do you persist? That's the thing. I mean, it's almost like we need to be able to insert it into the minds of the people who are trying to do it. Okay, here's your persistence genes. We're going to turn it on right now. Your persistence gene is now on. Now you're going to persist. You're just going to take action.
One of the things that I felt that was driving me is, but like I said, because of my childhood, but what I grew up in, I'm like, this has to stop at some point. I'm not going to be the next one that puts a bullet in their head. I'm just not going to do that. And I'm not trying to paint this picture like it was all upbeat and perfect. I mean, I struggled, I fought, I thought about giving up, but I never did. I just kept getting up and going the next day. And then one day things got a little bit better. And one of the greatest things that happened to me that I share often is, after being in recovery for a while, things had gotten pretty good, but is when I discovered the secret, the law of attraction, that I was able to, once I had that was the turbo boost. That was the one that gave me the information of how to go, now, and I wish I had this information earlier, but I got it now. And that was the turbo boost for all of this.
I've often wished that I could figure out what the formula is for persistence, other than you just keep trying. But then again, that's what it comes down to. You just keep trying.
But one of the things that I developed pretty early, this was from my weightlifting, because one of the great things that I started doing as a child was lifting weights. And I continue to do that today. And I worked out, I would go to this gym, and it was a really hardcore gym. It was like a bunch of 40-year-old men that were heavy duty power lifters.
Oh, okay.
And
very old school.
So, I mean, and I walked in 105 pounds, like 6 foot tall, 105 pound, super skinny kid, and said, I want to work out. Nobody laughed at me, but they had me work out. And when I didn't get it, I would be mad. And they go, you have to understand, failure is winning. When you push yourself to failure, you're winning. They programmed in me, failure was part of success. So you don't stop. You just know the benchmark at that point and you keep going. So I've had these hardcore powerlifting guys who were at that time were moving 500 and 600 pounds. And I was like, how can I even imagine? And then it was one of those things that I never, it was one of the greatest lessons I ever learned. They were about not giving up. There was a guy at the gym that had an accident at his job, and his lower left leg was cut off. I was like, oh my God, how terrible. 3 weeks after it being cut off, he's in the gym doing his bench press. And I was like, what? He's like, well, yeah, we got to get a prosthetic leg. We're not going to be able to do squats like we used to do, but we still can do bench press. And he just lifted the next 30 years like that. It never was a moment of quitting. So I had a lot of the unintentional. I didn't seek these people out for that. I wanted to get bigger. And eventually I became the guy that was moving 600 pounds. Eventually became that. Then I was like, if I could do that, anything's doable. So I had a programming, a subconscious programming, that failure is not a bad thing. I've never been afraid to fail. I don't mind failing. Now quitting's a different story, but I like to push things. And if I don't get it right, well, I just got to work harder, try differently.
That's a really interesting lesson that those guys instilled in you. The idea that failure is a win. That's not a loss. That's not the way we would normally think about it.
Now, in the gym, it is a win because, okay, when I first started in the gym, the bar weighs 45 pounds. And I laid under the bar and I was really hard time balancing. And I could only do it like 8 times. It's just the bar, right? And, so I'm like, okay, well, the bar, it's heavy, but I did it. And eventually I realized, okay, I went till I failed. And then a week later when I tried it, I was able to do a couple extra. Then a week later, I was able to put 10 pounds on each side. Then a month later, I could put 25 pounds on each side. And then a year later, I have 225 pounds on the bar. And so failure was my benchmark of where I needed to go to grow.
I agree. I mean, what you're saying makes sense to me, the way you're describing it. I just know that when we're actually faced with failure, that's not the first place our minds go. So
right.
It's an important thing to learn. It's another thing to actually apply it. Okay, I got to start believing that failures are successes. It's easy to hear. It's hard to do.
Those guys, again, I believe none of that's a mistake. I believe the need to go get bigger and stronger because I was this skinny little kid was I didn't know the life lesson that was going to bring. I didn't know that what this was going to teach me. These are not philosophical geniuses that I'm dealing with, to be honest with you. I love these guys, but these are men that spend their entire life, their whole social life is built around lifting weights. Yeah. They work out, they eat well, they compete in powerlifting contests, and they repeat it until they die. Mm-hmm. And I that was my peer group. I was 20 years younger than anybody in the gym, mostly. And they were very kind. They never yelled. They never made fun of me, but they said, look, if you're going to whine about failing, you got to go find another gym. We all fail. We all come in here. We all could barely do that bar the first day. We all have that in common. And you have to accept that weightlifting or powerlifting, you're going to, if you don't fail every day, you're not going to get better.
So I think perhaps you just identified rather quickly one of the key ways to continue to accept failure and to buy into the idea of failure.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how you said it, but the gist of it was that when you fail, you grow, and just by, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but just by going through that step-by-step process, you grow. I don't know how else to, there's no way to say that. You just grow from it.
But also, we have touched on this in a previous podcast. One of my most fascinating things recently is after failure, after a perceived failure, whether you're an athlete, usually it's measured with athletes, but it could be in anything, it could be academics. After a perceived failure, the neuroplasticity, learning after failure is increased almost 30 times. The failure induces increased neuroplasticity. The mind hates to fail. So it's ready for more. But the people that shy away from trying again never leverage that increased neuroplasticity.
So there's another key. Part of the key to making these shifts is to recognize how our nervous systems work.
Yes.
And applying that knowledge to our advantage.
Yes. Yes.
So by knowing that neuroplasticity actually contributes to our ability to grow from failure, perhaps that gives us the incentive to be willing to fail just so that we can gain some growth.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that I believe is success. A lot of successful people, everybody you'll watch in the Olympics this upcoming summer is an expert at failing. All of them.
Mm-hmm.
You never get to be Olympic level anything without a lot of failure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about it, most successful people, I fail. I mean, it's one thing that I love about our newer generation. There's a lot of criticism about younger people today.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, failure was not an option. That was the slogan. Failure is not an option. You don't fail. So that message was, well, if I'm going to fail, I'm not going to try. Well, a lot of the young people I work with are like, failure is a tool. How do we know where the limits are until we fail? How do we know you can't do? So that's been a changing mindset. Everybody I work with, I try to, failure is, if you become a failure, that's wrong. That's terrible. But using failure as a growth mechanism is the most efficient way to learn and grow. Push yourself to that failure and then go every time.
Okay. So I think we're actually starting to outline a strategy here for how do you make that mental shift? How do you develop that habit of persistence that we were talking about earlier? And one of the key ways is to simply adopt a different belief about failure and apply that belief differently from the way we would normally tend to do it.
Right. If you're given a problem to solve, a complex calculus problem, there's a formula that is made to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any of those formulas, by the way, but there are formulas that exist. Yeah. So take my word, there's a formula. But if you have that formula, you can solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So in life, if you have the formula of, I'm going to use failure as a growth mechanism, I'm going to use gratitude as a tool to attract what I want. If you all these are tools. If you understand the tools, you can solve anything. But also, you got to be careful of the programming of those around you. Oh, don't do that. You can't do that. So you have to be very careful of who you're allowing. It gets back to relationships. It gets back to that quote in the relationship. I need my people around me to understand that I'm having a business meeting with my business partner on Wednesday night. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And our list to talk about is like 15 things long. Not all those are not going to get done. They're on our list. We're going to have to pick where we want to shoot our weapon, so to speak. We want to shoot our money, where we want to invest our time. We gotta quell that down. But I want to go through them all. I want to see where they're at, but I'm also going to have to, where am I going to put my focus? Where are we going to, I like people that will do that dance with me. Some of them are ridiculous, so we're going to get rid of those, but they're on the list to discuss at least.
Interesting how you also tied us back to the original topic that relationships are everything, because really the primary relationship in our lives is the one we've been talking about. That's the relationship we have with ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that relationship is the most challenging. It's the most rewarding. It has the most information. It has the most opportunity for failure. It has the most opportunity for growth afterward. That relationship with ourselves, it's the one relationship that I think we need to give the most attention to. And we don't usually do that, but oh boy, that's really like that's the gold standard right there.
It is. And one of the things that I try to use as an example, I mean, to this day, I failed multiple times in the gym this morning. I really did. I worked hard. Felt great, exhausted. I know my muscles are growing and keeping my muscle mass. I'm doing all the things I need to be doing. But for me to use failure as a tool that I use, I don't know anybody that would say, Joel, you're a failure. It's not, I don't think that's that's not how I view myself at all. I just use failure as a tool. I use gratitude as a tool. I've learned the tools that work. And these are the things that when we're in relationships of any type, my relationship with failure, my relationship with growth, I now understand that, the idea that we have to adhere to one old way of thinking is just not true. We need to redefine everything that we're doing. And that's what we can do that.
That's probably something that brings us right to what I think should be the last point that we talk about here, which is something you kind of stated quickly, but I want to go back to it. And that is, we all experience failure, but that doesn't make us a failure.
Absolutely.
In other words, our thought process about how we feel about ourselves as humans need not be in any way affected by failures that we experience.
Completely.
So that's a choice we can make. That's a fairly easy one, which is just because I've experienced failure, I don't think of myself as a failure. I think of myself as being successful.
Yeah. Bill Gates, he didn't come up with Windows 3.0. It's there. Let's go make $1 trillion. That didn't happen that way.
No. Especially it was terrible.
It was terrible, but it was the one that first made it to market, right? Is that the one that first made it to market?
Well, it was like the later end of it, was like 3.9 or something like that. And it still didn't work. It still failed completely. It was the ultimate expression of failure. It wasn't until we got to the point that it was actually, able to do something like, open a window.
Right. Well, and there was Windows 1.
We never got out of the laboratory, but it was there.
No. So my point is he went 1.1, 1.2, 1. And all these are massive events, but he didn't ever quit. The failures made his stuff better. And that's an amazing thing. When you look at it that way, everybody that I know that is wildly successful has become very comfortable with failing in the process.
You almost get good at it, really.
Yeah.
You get good at failing.
Yeah, you get good at accepting it as a tool. You're never giving into it. A lot of people will say, "Well, you can't accept failure as or you'll become a failure." They're not related. Failure is a growth mechanism. You can be a failure, and you can fail at life and not keep trying. Then that's a terrible thing. But everything's perspective based. There's nothing more powerful than not giving up. The persistence of everything. Success comes to those that don't give up. Period.
Wait, that's the phrase to end the conversation on. Success comes to those who don't give up.
Absolutely.
Love it. All right. Well, my friend, as usual, we hit the ball out of the park. I got a baseball analogy in there.
That's so sad. That's so sad. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll hit out of the park. You can throw for the touchdown. How's that?
Okay. That works a little better. Yeah. That does.
No, seriously, this is good. Really, really good.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Love you out of it. So thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on Elevate Today. Goodbye, everybody.